There is an ancient book that recounts the journey of the patriarch Abraham, not the journey from Ur to the promised land, but a voyage through the heavens beyond the material world to confront metaphysical powers face to face. There, he witnesses a terrifying being manipulating the minds and souls of mankind, a fallen entity named Azazel, the one who has sown war, hatred, sorcery, and rebellion since the beginning. This book is called The Apocalypse of Abraham. Strangely enough, you won't find it in any modern Bible. It was removed, forgotten, deemed unfit for transmission. But why? What does this book contain that made ancient religious powers and scholars so afraid they had to erase it from official history? Could it be that the Apocalypse of Abraham reveals a secret the world wasn't ready to know? Throughout biblical history, Abraham is called the father of many nations, the one chosen directly by God to receive a sacred covenant. But few people know that there exists a deeply profound revelation tied to him, once copied, read, and treasured, then vanished. Not because it was flawed, but because it was too blunt, too daring, and too close to the truth. That book, The Apocalypse of Abraham, is not just a prophecy. It is a mystical diary of a conversation between Abraham and a high celestial being, who unveils to him the unseen layers of heaven, the true nature of fallen angels, the role of the demon Azazel in humanity's fall, and a prophetic vision of the end times. Unlike the promises of blessings found in Genesis, this book is a warning. It turns the narrative upside down. Abraham is not just the obedient patriarch, he becomes the one to whom ultimate truth is revealed, a truth many religious powers did not want to spread. Imagine this: if Abraham, the first to receive the covenant, was shown the evil forces, the judgment, and the rising of dark spirits in the heart of the world, then perhaps the entire foundation of many current theological systems would have to be re-examined. Just as the Book of Enoch was excluded for describing the Watchers, fallen angels who fathered giants, the Apocalypse of Abraham suffered the same fate, not because it was false, but because it was too real, too different, and too uncontrollable within the framework of post-New Testament theology. Maybe that's why it only survived in a Slavonic manuscript, cast aside by Roman Catholicism and Orthodox Judaism. Yet early Christians in the Caucasus and Eastern Europe viewed it as a sacred and indispensable part of Revelation. And here's something few notice. In the Apocalypse of Abraham, Abraham is not only the recipient of a promise, he is a witness to a cosmic war between light and darkness, between God and rebellious forces that once stood before his throne. He sees the origin of the fall, the cost of free will, and the beginning of a final battle that will end human history. Which leads us to ask, if Abraham knew all this thousands of years ago, why have we never been taught, heard, or read it in mainstream theological education? The real question is no longer why it was erased, but are we brave enough to read what the patriarch once saw, but the world chose to forget? The Apocalypse of Abraham is an ancient text written around the 1st or 2nd century AD, and today it exists only in a Slavonic manuscript. This is important. The original Hebrew or Aramaic version has been lost. Only copies passed down through faithful communities in the Caucasus and Eastern Europe remain, outside the mainstream theological currents of Judaism and Roman Catholicism. What makes the Apocalypse of Abraham truly unique is that it's not merely a prophetic document. It is a full revelation, in the truest sense of the word. Over the course of 32 chapters, Abraham is led into the heavenly realms by an angel named Yahawel, a mysterious divine being whose role closely resembles that of the archangel Michael, yet bears qualities almost as if he were the embodiment of the name of God. There, Abraham not only witnesses the beauty of heaven, but also sees the depths of hell. He is shown the true nature of the fallen powers, most notably Azazel, a figure deeply tied to early humanity's sin. In one terrifying scene, Azazel appears as a fiery dragon from the abyss, bound in fire and darkness, yet still wielding great influence over mankind. The book portrays how Azazel leads humanity into downfall, not just through material temptation, but by imparting forbidden knowledge, weaponry, sorcery, pride, and the means by which man exalts himself to the level of the divine. This aligns closely with the Book of Enoch, where fallen angels teach mankind to craft weapons and manipulate the elements. One especially striking detail: in the Apocalypse of Abraham, Abraham is shown the entire timeline of redemption, from Adam's fall to Moses' rise, the destruction of the temple, and finally, a vision of the end of the world. This makes it a true apocalypse, in the same vein as the Book of Revelation, but told from a Jewish perspective. However, the book's content diverges drastically from canonical scripture. It names and clearly defines the role of Azazel, something the Bible often avoids directly. It presents an angel whose role borders on a divine embodiment, deeply sensitive in monotheistic theology. It describes the heavenly realms, sacred beings, and the interactions between humans and the divine in a mystical tone similar to Kabbalistic or extra-biblical traditions. Even more controversially, the Apocalypse of Abraham includes a passage stating, "Those who truly keep the word of the Lord will be persecuted and tortured by those who falsely claim the faith." This was seen as an accusation against both Orthodox Judaism and the early Christian Church, and put the book in direct conflict with both. Some modern scholars even believe that the Apocalypse of Abraham influenced John's book of Revelation, with parallels like thunder, angels bearing bowls of wrath, the red dragon, fire falling from heaven, and the destruction of the holy city. Yet perhaps the most controversial idea in the book is this: there is an eternal war between light and darkness, but the righteous will not win through strength, but through endurance, faithfulness, and understanding of the revelation. In an age where religion was deeply politicized and tightly controlled, such a message was simply unacceptable. The Apocalypse of Abraham wasn't forgotten because it was weak, but because it was too powerful, too clear, and too dangerous for established religious systems. So it was cast aside, burned, or hidden. But like a flame beneath ashes, the truth remains, waiting to be reignited. But what exactly gives the Apocalypse of Abraham its fearsome power? To understand that, we need to dive deep into its structure, symbolism, and hidden messages, where ancient theology, mystical tradition, and metaphysical revelation intertwine. Amid the layers of revelation and theology within the Apocalypse of Abraham, there is a fleeting image, yet one powerful enough to make us pause and reflect. It is the moment when Abraham sees a fiery altar covered with the burning flesh of animals representing the nations. And within that fire stands a man, not an angel nor a demon, writhing, struggling and screaming as light from God's throne shines directly upon him. The passage simply reads, "This was not one who was cast down, but one who chose to step out of the light." That man is not condemned by God. It is he himself who stepped out of the light, as though human nature always seeks freedom. But when that freedom is divorced from truth, it becomes a fire that consumes the soul. This image echoes the deepest elements of the modern human condition. We are no longer compelled to sin, yet we choose to live in darkness for reasons that seem so reasonable, like survival, success, power, and self-satisfaction. This makes the vision in the Apocalypse of Abraham not merely a metaphysical image, but a disturbing mirror for anyone still holding on to a sliver of conscience. It is not speaking about someone else. It is speaking about each of us. That may be why the book was removed, not because it recounts ancient legends, but because it touches the very heart of hypocrisy, a disease infecting religion, politics, and society alike. It does not target outsiders, but those who claim to belong to the faith, while living contrary to the light they proclaim. The Apocalypse of Abraham is not a dry prophetic text. It is a mirror and also a blade. It reflects the state of faith and it cuts through illusion. It strips away the opposition between religious form and genuine moral essence. And for that reason, it is not easy to swallow. It is not easy to preach. It is not easy to control. That is when the viewer begins to wonder, why have we never heard sermons on this book? Why is it not found in theological curricula? Why has the light been dimmed by those tasked with guarding it? And more importantly, if the prophecy in the Apocalypse of Abraham is true, then where exactly are we living within that revelation today? Could the fire Abraham once saw be smoldering in our very age? This is the central question, the peak of the entire journey of discovery. Why would a text so filled with revelation, moral clarity, heavenly visions, and end times prophecy be erased from the canonical Bible? Why would someone like Abraham, so repeatedly referenced throughout both the Old and New Testaments, have an apocalypse that remains unrecognized? The answer is not found in a lack of authenticity, but in its confrontational nature. The Apocalypse of Abraham strikes at the very roots of religious systems, theological constructions, and the politics of post-biblical religion. It shatters the safe theology model. The Apocalypse of Abraham doesn't describe a distant, abstract God. It depicts a God who is judging, grieving, and watching as his people are deceived and manipulated by spiritual entities they no longer even perceive. It reveals that not all who claim to be God's people truly belong to him. And for any religious system, that's an unforgivable accusation. Instead of affirming any church, temple, or priestly lineage, the book exposes the rot from within, those presumed to be righteous bowing before power, wealth, and sin wrapped in ritual, a threat to religious power structures. The 1st and 2nd centuries were pivotal in shaping Orthodox theology, especially as church councils began to compile, select, and eliminate texts to fit the emerging order. The Apocalypse of Abraham presents a dangerous idea that God reveals himself not through institutions or temples, but directly to an individual who gave up everything to follow a heavenly call. This undermines the clergy's monopoly on revelation and becomes a threat to be silenced. Azazel's appearance as a clearly identified spiritually fallen being is also a blow to oversimplified theological models of evil and sin. Like the Book of Enoch, which was excluded for describing fallen angels teaching mankind to make weapons and spell books, the Apocalypse of Abraham goes further. It reveals that modern human behavior is part of Azazel's sweet deception, making the blind believe they can see. Anti-systemic content and uncomfortable prophecies. In the book's final chapter, a warning is given to those who wear the mask of righteousness. They will preach God, yet harbor hatred in their hearts. They will proclaim truth, but live in lies. This wasn't an attack on any one group. It was a condemnation of any religious system that had lost its soul. One prophecy says, "A day will come when the righteous will no longer find a place in the house of worship. Those who do good will be cast out, while the deceivers will be exalted on the altar." Apply that to our modern context, and it still rings with undeniable prophetic clarity. A book for seekers, not rulers. The Apocalypse of Abraham is not easily understood. It's not meant for the masses. It cannot be used as a tool to control public faith. It's for those truly seeking God with all their heart, those willing to ask hard questions, to stand in the fire and not turn away from the light. That's why it was removed, not because it was wrong, but because it was too right, too deep, too hard to preach in a church where people want simple answers. The Apocalypse of Abraham is an invitation, but also a challenge, a doorway cracked open into a realm of revelation long left unexplored. The silence of history, a choice or an imposition. What haunts us isn't just the content of the Apocalypse of Abraham, but how history handled it. Unlike other apocryphal texts dismissed for vague origins or superstition, this one was purposefully preserved by minority communities, particularly in Eastern Europe and the Caucasus, where faith wasn't under centralized theological control. Why wasn't a clearly prophetic revelatory text with theology matching early New Testament thought not copied, taught, or preached broadly? Some scholars call this a systematic silence. History didn't erase it by force, but by a deliberate neglect. Abraham's role in major religions and what no one dares to say. Judaism, Christianity, and Islam all revere Abraham as the patriarch of faith. But each system packages him differently. Abraham of obedience, Abraham of covenant, Abraham of tribe. Yet the Apocalypse of Abraham shows a radically different Abraham, a man who saw the future corruption of faith, who was shown the end times, who conversed with angels of light and darkness. This Abraham cannot be controlled. He doesn't serve doctrinal order, and that may be why he, within this book, is hidden from mainstream theology. The truth is, the Abraham of the Apocalypse may be too powerful, too dangerous, not a pious model, but a sacred witness, staring down darkness with divinely opened eyes, a revelation that cannot be controlled. The most critical difference with the Apocalypse of Abraham is that it defies theological control. Unlike canonical texts, which are interpreted within church tradition, this book follows no fixed system. It does not divide the world into black and white. It does not preach a cheap model of salvation, nor does it strengthen the authority of any religious class. Instead, it forces readers to confront themselves and the forces both within and beyond their souls. It gives interpretive authority to no hierarchy, but leaves space open, space for personal revelation, for prayer, for private reflection. And that is its strength, and also the reason it was excluded. The problem of truth that should not be believed. We often think truth can be distorted, but sometimes truth is hidden, not because it's false, but because it doesn't serve what people want to believe. The Apocalypse of Abraham is the perfect example of a truth that must not be believed. A truth that does not support power, does not comfort the crowd, cannot be marketed, and isn't easy to preach. This is a truth meant only for souls hungry for real life, those who dare to step into the light without barriers. It isn't made to please. It is meant to transform. Questions that can no longer be ignored. Could it be that the light is sometimes hidden behind the artificial lights of religion? Could it be that we've traded truth for comfort in our faith? And if these prophecies are indeed coming true, what do we do with the rest of the truth that remains untold? The Apocalypse of Abraham doesn't answer for you. It only shows you. The question is, are you brave enough to see it? By now, you probably understand why the Apocalypse of Abraham was removed from the Bible. But there's something few people know, and it's almost never mentioned from any pulpit. This book was once read aloud in certain early churches throughout the Caucasus, Armenia, and even Syria. According to a Slavonic manuscript housed in an ancient monastery near Kiev, there is a passage that reads, "The Apocalypse of Abraham was read after the Passover, amidst the hymns of fire and redemption." This shows that the Apocalypse of Abraham was once a sacred part of worship, not a heretical or fringe text. And do you know what's even more fascinating? Many of the images in this book, such as light piercing through the veil of the cosmos and the presence of a guardian angel named Yahawel, also appear in ancient Ge'ez language prayer texts from Ethiopia, though under different names. This could mean the revelation within the Apocalypse of Abraham was never truly forgotten. It was carefully preserved in mystical traditions outside mainstream theology. What's more, some scholars believe the book even echoes through Eastern European folklore. In Ruthenian tales, there is a legend about a patriarch guided by a fire-headed angel through the seventh heaven, where light is so intense all things dissolve. It's metaphorical, but clearly influenced by the original Apocalypse. And there's something that's almost never discussed in mainstream scholarship. Many of the themes and symbols in the Apocalypse of Abraham also appear in the esoteric writings of Jewish mysticism, Cabala, especially the concept of heavenly realms, divine light, and intermediary beings whose names aren't clearly given in the canonical Bible. In the Kabbalistic text, Sefer HaBahir, one line reads, "The first light is not for every eye to see. It is for those led by the still small voice." That image is strikingly similar to Yahawel in the Apocalypse. While no one claims a direct link, the symbolic parallels are impossible to ignore. Another intriguing aspect is the book's presence in the underground theology of medieval secret societies. In documents associated with mystical groups like the Cathars in southern France or certain Armenian monastic orders, you'll find fragments believed to come from the Apocalypse of Abraham, rewritten as mystical poetry and used in secret prayers. We live in an age where everything can be rediscovered, but not everything is seen unless you know where to look. The Apocalypse of Abraham is not just a book, it's a gateway, and those bold enough to walk through it will never see the world the same way again. Its true power doesn't lie in whether it was printed in the Bible, but in whether it's coming alive in you. Perhaps even right now, you're hearing the voice of Yahawel, not echoing from the heavens, but stirring in your awakening soul. You've just walked through a journey that's not only about knowledge, but about the soul. From the heights of heaven where Abraham was led, to the abyss where Azazel manipulates mankind, to the silent undercurrents of forgotten theology, the Apocalypse of Abraham emerges not just as an ancient manuscript, but as a calling. A silent, weighty calling, echoing from the quiet corners of history into the hearts of the awakened. This book may have been removed from the Bible, but it cannot be erased from sacred memory. It no longer belongs to scribes or institutions, but to those who still hunger for truth, those who dare to ask, to doubt what was deemed unchangeable, and who have the courage to walk into a light that dazzles rather than comforts. What will you do with this truth? The question is no longer, why did they hide it? But rather, now that you know, what will you do with this truth? Truth, like the first light, doesn't need to be proven. It only needs to be revealed. And if you've stayed this long, maybe that light has already touched you. Maybe you've come to see that what was hidden wasn't because it was false, but because it was too true, dangerously true. Keep searching, dig deeper, ask the questions you've never dared to ask. Revisit the forgotten pages. Listen for the whispers drowned out by the world's noise, because sometimes those very whispers are the voice calling from eternity. If you've ever felt like you were living under artificial light, where everything shines outwardly but feels empty inside, then maybe the Apocalypse of Abraham isn't just about the past, but is speaking directly to you. Maybe you've seen Yahawel in a dream you couldn't explain. Maybe you've heard a calling you dismissed as imagination. But what if it was real? What if you were being invited to look deeper, walk further? And if something is stirring in your spirit, don't remain silent. Write it down, share it, keep that flame alive, because in an age of darkness cloaked in light, any genuine flame is a miracle. If any of this touched your heart, don't keep it to yourself. Share this video. Send it to someone you know who's seeking truth. Subscribe to the channel if you want to discover more forgotten books of the Bible and revelations waiting to be reignited. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any doors waiting for you to walk through. And remember, some doors only open when you're bold enough to knock. And once opened, they change you forever. In the next video, we'll open a page believed by many to have been sealed by angels since the time of Enoch. A text once thought to be lost, but in truth has always been here, quietly waiting to be decoded. And you, the one who's made it this far, might just be holding the first key. Don't be afraid if you don't have all the answers. As long as you keep seeking, as long as you remain faithful to the light, you are never walking alone. Those who sincerely search for truth, wherever they are walking this path with you. May the first light, the same light Abraham once saw, also illuminate your path today. Not a light that soothes, but a light that awakens. See you in the next video, where we will step through yet another gate, locked away for thousands of years. But this time, you already know how to open it.